Hello, happy Sunday, and welcome to this episode of the Chillinois podcast. If you're watching it on YouTube live right now, thank you so much for tuning in and making us a part of your Sunday. I'll keep this quick. I know you're tuning in because this is the first time we've ever had a cop on the show. Isn't that crazy? We've gone from smoking pot and talking about cops to smoking pot with cops on the show. Oh, what a crazy road we've been on. Hey, this will be the first time we've had a cop on the show, but in case you didn't know, we have a Patreon page, which is where we debut our newest content. And for the second time, I've sit down with a cop. So you're about to watch the first time I've ever talked to a cop on the Chillinois podcast. I just had another cop on the show. His name is Howard Woldridge. It was episode number 266. And like I say, you can stream it on our Patreon page right now. That's patreon.com/Chillinois. It only costs $3 to support us. It's the best way to support us, and it allows you to get exclusive access to new content from us. If Howard sounds familiar, if his name sounds familiar, it's because you may have seen him on at the Capitol lobbying for federal cannabis policy. You may even recognize him because he wears crazy shirts like the shirt that he wore during my interview, which said, "Cops say legalize heroin. Ask me why." I asked him why and so much more. Once again, you can stream that episode, the second conversation I've ever had with a cop on this podcast, on Patreon right now. Just go to patreon.com/Chillinois. That's episode number 266. We have several other episodes that are available exclusively for streaming on Patreon right now, including our series with legal sex workers from the state of Nevada. That's right. If you didn't know, prostitution is completely legal in the state of Nevada. So we've been sitting down with licensed sex workers, both currently employed and formerly employed, as well as managers and other people that work at the licensed brothels, for a conversation not about what happens in the bedroom, but a conversation about what the working conditions are like at an establishment like this. Is it a happy place to work at? Would you want to work there? Find out the answer at chillinois.net/sex. Once again, those episodes are available exclusively for streaming on our Patreon right now. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Dave Franco, the very first member of law enforcement to come onto the Chillinois podcast. Enjoy the show. Well, Dave, welcome to the Chillinois podcast. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience?
Cole, thank you very much first for having me. My name is Dave Franco. Let's see, how do I describe myself? I actually, related to what we're talking about, related to our purpose here, I was a Chicago police officer for 31 years and became a member of Law Enforcement Action Partnership when viewing. I was pretty progressive in most of my views to begin with. Became a member of Law Enforcement Action Partnership, LEAP, also known as LEAP, and have been advocating for drug policy and criminal justice, law enforcement reform since joining LEAP. I'm currently an adjunct professor at Wright College, and I'm teaching administration of juvenile justice, and I'm also teaching police organization and management. And I love my students, and I love the opportunity to share what little knowledge I have with my students at Wright. It's really been literally like, I don't mean that in a corny way, life changing. I don't know what else. I don't know. That kind of the nutshell. Me, you want to know other stuff too. I play drums in a rock and roll band.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, man.
I like that. That's a big part of me. And I've got an incredible wife and daughter that I am madly in love with. So
That's awesome.
that kind of puts it in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, yeah. Hell yeah. Well, thank you for introducing yourself. So you said 30 years in law enforcement?
31. Hold on now.
31.
31. Yeah.
Nice.
And don't ask me where that 31 years went because boy, it was something else. It was I honestly, I can't account for it, and I really, really, I'd still be working if I could, but I aged out. Actually, it worked out because I would not have been able to do what I'm doing now. I wouldn't have been able to teach, um, and we moved out of the city too. I would still have been in the city. So, which, I love, born and raised in Uptown. Um, so I still feel that sometimes, man. I'll go back into the city and like I was on the street. I also I'm a private investigator, a licensed investigator with the state of Illinois. It's called a detective license, and I work with the law department for the city. They retain me, and I also work with some of the bigger law firms in the city on police misconduct cases primarily. But I'm also working now on a wrongful conviction case where actually our client is a state's attorney who was accused of some untoward at coercing some testimony from individuals, and we're trying to. It's pretty complicated. There are 60, I believe, 60 witnesses in this case, and there's about $60 million at stake. So it's serious stuff. I like that because it gets me back on the street, which I just, there's nothing, I know this is the Chillinois podcast. We're talking sometimes about altering your mental state. But man, there's nothing that gets me higher than go on. I get high. Nothing that gets me higher than being on the street. It is just like, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I can only imagine, dude. Well, tell us, like, I got the impression that you were kind of part of the hippie culture before you got in law enforcement, and maybe that's not entirely true.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But I was going to ask, so you're probably one of the first people in law enforcement, or formerly law enforcement, to come on this show. And I know that this is going to be fascinating for our audience. So tell us how you got into law enforcement 31 years ago, roughly.
This is pretty funny. And this is kind of how my life has been, just like stumbling along and things happen. No predetermination of any sort. So I guess my dad was a music teacher and pretty progressive with his viewpoints, which is odd because and I look back at that particular part of my life, I don't know what changed, but with him. But anyway, he would send me down to a place called Carl Fisher Music, which was at Wabash and Jackson. And he would give me the top. I would pick up the top 40 survey of songs that were on the radio, and he would send me down there. I was like 10 or 12 years old, taking a red line down there. And I would call him up and read off the top 5 or 10, and I would buy the sheet music for those songs and bring them back home, and he would transpose the sheet music for his students. And once the Beatles hit, everybody wanted to be in a rock and roll band. So he had a lot of students. I remember him teaching like all day, all night on the weekends. But he would also tell me, make sure you pick up the Black Panther newspaper on the way home. So there was a place called the Book Box that was next to the Uptown Theater, which was a total head shop. Like total. So I was 10 years. So this is 67, 68, 69, right? I was 12 years old. So it was completely all hippied up, and Uptown was a craziness throughout the 70s also, from the 60s and 70s. So he was a Black Panther Defense Fund, a contributor. I remember one time that he had self-addressed stamped envelopes with Angela Davis was the chairperson, and I had those. I had a Fred Hampton pin, and I had some envelopes. And then when there was a museum exhibit at DuSable Museum, and I brought these up to I went there. It was some years back, maybe 10 years back, and I brought what I had from that Black Panther era that my father had kept, and I gave it to the curator, and they're looking at me like, "What's this white dude doing with this stuff?" And I explained, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." So I don't know that I don't know if how deeply ingrained it was in me, but I did see. I mean, I grew up in a mixed neighborhood, but too. The other thing is, I grew up in Uptown, and my high school had it wasn't the Native American, it was the Indian club: Indian, Greek, Italian, German, Swedish, Black, Mexican, Puerto Rican. Those were the clubs in high school. There was an Asian club too. That's how mixed it was during that time. So I think that I'd like to think that it's just a matter of, if you see people for what they are and looking for the same thing, it doesn't matter what color they are, what religion they are. They want to be safe. They want to be have their family taken care of. Just these basic needs that are met and that are important to everyone, no matter what. Have an appreciation for that, and not look at somebody like with the color of their skin or their religion or their culture. So maybe I'm oversimplifying that, and that's my personality. I really want to like people, but that certainly helped me. I did, and moving into what I do currently, or what I did when I became a police officer. My buddy George, my dear friend George, his brother was like one of our idols growing up. We call him John Bond, like James Bond, but John Bond. And he was an ass-kicking police officer, killed several people. When he was out there working, and when we had the opportunity to take the test, he said, "Come on, let's go take the test, man. We'll be partners, man. We'll work together. We're kicking doors. We'll catch the bad guys." And by the way, it's not like that. So it was a last minute thing. This is how he literally knocks on my window, like, "Come on, man, we're taking a test today." I'm blurry eyed, and so we go to. They're shutting the doors on us, literally. It was almost like a movie when we're running in slow motion, and they're shutting the doors, and we're like, "Ah!"
Right.
That's how it was. So we take the test. It was funny though, because I said, "I don't want to be a cop." Look, they hassle you for no reason. I'd have to get a haircut. I had my hair down to my shoulders there, and dyed like 4 different colors, like Tommy Bolin.
Yeah, they don't tend to have that long hair.
And I looked at him, I go, "And we can't pass a drug test." I go, "What do you want to do here? Are you really want to try this?" So as it turned out, we both became police officers. I did a lot. Kelly became a police officer. My buddy Eric. So 4 guys that I literally grew up with together all became police officers and did various things within the police department. So that community policing really saved my life. To go into policing in the early 90s, I was on the street for 5 years, and it reached a point where I'm like, "Is this really it? Is this how this is going to work?" It's just like, I enjoyed it because the street was fascinating. And dealing with people on every level, I thought was always fascinating. But the community policing was the worldwide trend in the early 90s. And I went back to school and I saw that as a trend. And we, up in Rogers Park, worked at the 24th District where Devon and Clark, and the stations there. So it was quite diverse. You had the lakefront, and then it went west all the way to the river. And I don't know, at some point in time, I thought that there were like, I don't know how many, 53 different languages and 23 different religions. And it was extremely different. They were very well organized for a community. And so community policing was introduced. And I was a little bit ahead of the Chicago Police Department wasn't prepared to implement it at all. But the community was waiting for us to understand and implement community policing, and that community is wonderful. And I still have friends that are there. And I grew up right down the street, and then once I moved around. I lived right in Rogers Park, a couple of apartments I had, and used to run around there and play in a million bars up there. So I had a progressive boss, and I use that term.
And really quick, I just wanted to explain for people listening. Am I correct in saying that community policing is, and I just Googled it, the system of allocating police officers to particular areas so that they become familiar with the locals? I mean, is that a pretty accurate?
Yeah, that's at a bare minimum. That's the starting point. And then I'll tell you this. This is funny, dude. And Freddie Lowe. So I'm like, oh wow, this is gonna be great. We're gonna work with the community, and my partner Freddie, who I was working 2432, I worked right around that Loyola area and the police district, the police station, and Freddie, we get a request as soon as there were 5 prototype districts in Chicago, and Rogers Park was one of those. And it was the most organized. That's why community policing worked, because there was a commitment by the police department and the community together. So we get a request from a community group to have the beat officers, which I was primary beat 2432, to come to a meeting to talk about community policing. And my partner, Freddie, we go to the meeting and he looks at me and he says, I'm not going in there. He goes, you like these community people. You go in there. I'm staying in the car. And he stayed in the car. So that was kind of like so if you didn't buy into it, and I bought into it because I believe like there's got to be a better way to do this than, locking somebody up for a $5 bag, $10 bag of weed for sure. So we, they pulled me off the car, and I worked in community police in the neighborhood relations office, and for a couple of years there, which was great because I was district wide, work with every community group that was there. And we got a lot done. We really did a lot. The community policing more, as in our permutation in Rogers Park, was the community comes to the police department and presents, these are the problems that we perceive that need to be taken care of. And rather than the police saying, no, we're gonna, we got car thefts, you go into your database and there's car thefts over here, and there's graffiti here, and there's drug sales there. And then the police are telling the community where no. The community is telling the police, these are our priorities. And we can work on those other things, but this is what we want to get done first. And we problem solve and, come up with what we can do to address those problems. And then the follow-up, you just can't say, well, my problem's gone, so I'm not going to the next meeting, which is a real issue. And I don't know how they're going to resolve it. Because at Rogers Park, they were wonderful. Everyone was in it for the long, for the long term. So that was really community policing. We got a lot. We really got a lot done. So I wound up going to my boss, Tom Byrne, who I'm still friends with and a mentor to me. Um, he got promoted and took me with him. We went down to a bigger area, and he was responsible as a deputy for 5 districts. So we continued to implement what we learned, or what we developed in Rogers Pride, including the drug and gang house prosecution ordinance, which is still in effect in the city. We crafted that, where we were holding building owners accountable for criminal activity on their property. There was a state statute, but we wanted to keep it local, so we developed a city ordinance so we could keep it in our local court, and keep it where we could go to court with our community members. So we implemented that citywide. We actually wound up locking up a slumlord, the Kaplans. I think they're both dead by now. It was pretty funny because they were like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They were like two exactly. You have to look like, which one is it? You wouldn't know who it was. They all wore suspenders, and they were like these older Jewish guys. And I would look at them and say, well, how come you're not in Boca, man? What are you doing here fighting this fight with all these, like, I got all these buildings, all these problems, whatever. Well, yeah, you got problems, all right. The district commander wants to talk to you. And we wound up actually locking them up. They had a building that they let go to crap, and we locked them up physically. Locked them up. He goes, looks at me, Tom Byrne. I told Kaplan, I go, come on in. He wants to talk to you. He goes, this is building code stuff. I'm in building court all the time. The police have nothing to do with this. I go, okay. And Kaplan comes in, and Byrne tells him that, and he looks at me. He goes, read him his rights. I'm like, oh, man, really? So the community loved it. The city loved it. So they said, we want to codify this so we can apply it citywide. So we went to Area 5, and we continued to move. I was in narcotics for a time there. That's when I really saw the drug problem because all we worked on were street corner conspiracy cases, and in abject crime, and individuals who really the last thing you want to do is put them in jail, because that's not the help that they need. So that's when I started looking outside of the police and like, this is just not, these young, particularly Black and brown, for the most part, we worked in areas that were Black. And I will say this, part of our problem today, and I contend that the overwhelming contact between law enforcement and the Black and brown community is based on the suspicion of drug activity or the use of drugs. And it's negative. And until we straighten that out, we are still going to have issues between law enforcement and the community. So that's got to be, we must end the drug. It must end. And I don't know, and I know that marijuana is legal in our state, but they screwed that up too. It's just cheaper to buy weed on the street, plain and simple. So I did see, it was abject, where the only economy in certain areas was the drug trade. And you've got these young men, in particular, who had no other choice but to get involved in that. And I'm thinking, what are we doing here? I mean, what are we actually trying to accomplish? So I came across LEAP, Law Enforcement Action Partnership, and I did I'm a Taurus. So I guess if you're a Taurus, then, you're all in on everything. So no different than when I was involved with, I got involved with LEAP, and that's been just an amazing journey for me. And I will say this also, Cole, there's not a lot of police officers. I think who's the only other one? Got it. His name slips my mind. he's working on, I thought he was working on his PhD at Northeastern. Buslick, Lieutenant Buslick, I forgot his first name. He's a member of LEAP. I'm a member of LEAP. And Mark Buslick, Mark with a C. I don't know anybody else that's a member of LEAP in the Chicago Police Department out of 12,000 plus. But I know everyone was like, yeah, that's just Franco. He's always, this, he thinks everybody can be saved, So, but I did run into some issues with, some hardcore police officers, like, it's illegal and, especially weed. That's a gateway drug. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to start with this because if I've got it, and I would explain to them that it's called weed for a reason. It's indigenous to this earth. We can go back 125 million years ago and see that there was and is evidence of our use. The Denisovians, do you know who the Denisovians? So I taught a couple of years back. At Wright College we had a certification for cannabis processing technician. And we're going to reconstitute that. I think there's some money out there. We want to put a grow together so we can actually get our hands in the dirt. So I think we're going to reconstitute that. But I taught intro to cannabis as part of that curriculum. And I think it was an inside joke. They're like, we're going to get the cop to teach about cannabis.
That's funny.
So I loved it. It was great. I did some science, very cursory, but I did a lot of history. And if you look back on the genesis of cannabis use, it does go back 125 million years. And so, I mean, what are we doing here? We're trying to, and we know that and I'll include you in this, we know that any prohibition laws that are created to prohibit do not. All they do is create a black market.
Right.
And with the Controlled Substance Act, which was never meant for the health or benefit of individuals.
Right.
That was created simply because Richard Nixon was a paranoid fiend who was worried that the hippies and the Black liberation movement and the anti-war, I would say not the hippies, the anti-war movement, which included hippies, and the Black liberation movement, if those two forces joined together, he felt that they were a threat to democracy as we knew it in 1970. When did you get? In 73. So the Controlled Substance Act was 1972, I believe.
Yeah.
And the only reason why he created that was, and Ehrlichman said it, one of his main henchmen said the only reason why we made it illegal is because we wanted to lock up the leaders, the blacks with cocaine and heroin, and the anti-war movement with marijuana. Did we know that there was no basis for us to clinically to do that? Of course we did, but we did it anyway. And Ehrlichman came right out and said it in an Esquire magazine interview in 1990. I believe it was in 1994. So everything that we do based on and every 90 seconds someone gets arrested for violating the Controlled Substance Act. And so everything we do related to that is based on a lie, as far as I'm concerned. Because as I read, what was it? I don't know what was it. We built a statue on clay feet. So that's what the Controlled Substance Act is.
And I just want to briefly interject that I think it's really notable to mention that, I think it's important to note that many other substances, such as poisonous chemicals, are literally poison, or that pose significant dangers to human health are not included in the list of scheduled drugs. The only drugs that are scheduled are the ones that affect your consciousness in a way that the government might not agree with,
Yeah.
for
Yes.
lack of better words.
So that's what brought me to Leap. But Leap has been the opportunity to. I'm honored to have been able to I believe get some things accomplished. We've got I've got some op-eds that were published I'm pointing to them on my wall. Decriminalizing small amounts of drugs, which I'm glad we're moving in that direction. Law enforcement is moving in that direction. Diversion and deflection. Also, co-respond. I've got bad news for Brandon Johnson. Brandon Johnson thinks that he makes it sound like having healthcare professionals responding to calls, mental health calls in the city of Chicago is his idea. It's been in effect, I believe, for at least 2 years with the Care Team program. And it's been around in Perry on the East Coast for probably 20 years. Now law enforcement is moving towards that harm reduction cohort, understanding that depending on who you're asking, between 38, I believe, percent and 60% of 911 calls do not require a law enforcement response. It's laid out pretty much, but I'm actually reading a book now that, how about this? No More Police. But what they're coming up, what the authors are presenting is that, and these were the statistics. Look, we don't need police to respond to, a measurable percentage of the calls. And I tell my students this: if somebody picks up the phone and says a spaceship landed on the corner of State and Madison, guess what? They're sending a police car out there. So it'd be pretty cool, actually, right? Whoa,
right.
I mean, that might account for all those for what's going on. So to me, I think we're moving forward, especially in terms of harm reduction. The issue with police officers, they want to help, they want to do something, So for them to be in a situation where they can't help, I think puts them, that they don't feel like they're adequate. But then again, they can't solve every single problem, even though they're called upon to just about solve every single problem. So I think the movement towards harm reduction is very, very important. And more important is the realization that we should be moving towards harm reduction in the law enforcement world. That's what's important, because now the culture and the mindset is changing. And it's going to be generational. My students get a full dose of law enforcement action partnership policy. So as I said earlier, I have students that there's other instructors that are not quite like me. And one of my students last year said, he compared me to another instructor. I won't mention the other instructor's name, but he said,
sure.
He said, that instructor thinks everyone's a scumbag and you think everybody can be saved. I go, well, see, is it good? So you get both sides. You get his perspective and you get my perspective.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm very, very fortunate to have, and currently working on several House bills that are very, very important. Coming up this week, I don't know why they're all coming up this week. We've got the the
It'll be on
overdose
the
prevention
ninth
site,
or the
uh,
8th, I meant to say.
the Illinois Cure Act, which is really, um, when we're talking about trying to deschedule psychedelics, and really, really proven now to with PTSD and PTSD and depression with micro dosing of psychedelics. Um, this is, I think, really interesting. I think that's going to be a world changer for some individuals. And then, of course, what the overdose prevention, I'm working with the Illinois Harm Reduction and Recovery Coalition, and the wonderful work that Chelsea Laliberte does with her with her nonprofit work is fantastic. And I'm also working with LEAP on another House bill and Senate bill that would help eliminate fines related to juveniles as a disposition. It's kind of, believe it or not, but the juveniles have to pay for probation and they have to pay for electronic monitoring, and these kids come from
Right.
families that can't afford
Sure.
it. And they just get buried under these fines. And guess what? We put them in jail. The worst thing we could do is, we want to rehabilitate them. We want to put them in
Right.
community programs. That's what we should be doing, and we do. And there's 14 states that are actually involved in a more progressive manners of restitution, and Illinois got to become a part of that. So those are my public service announcements
Yeah.
for the
Well, hey,
work.
I love everything you had to say. I wanted to kind of, I feel like I've got a pretty good idea how we can go from here. Like, you mentioned that you have people that kind of ascribe that you seem to be, let's just say, a little too optimistic. But I like take it as you speaking from experience and realizing what your scope of work should be and what it shouldn't be. And I wonder, like from your perspective, how does that not calculate for people that you're like, look, dude, you remember those? Like, I just think of like, particularly in the instance of talking about sending a social worker, like you're literally like, that's something you don't have to deal with anymore. Like, I don't know if I'm sure you've watched Cops, but it seems like most of what's on Cops is like domestic disputes. And it's like,
Yeah,
should that be a armed person there or should that be a mediator? Just somebody who can mediate a dispute. Like, why
yeah,
does there have to be an armed agent of the government there? And I'm not saying that there can't be. I'm just saying like maybe he should also be accompanied by a mediator, somebody who knows how to mediate. And so I guess my question was, sorry, my question is, how does it seems like people take it as you dissing on the police, but really you're saying, hey, I support law enforcement. I just want to more accurately define what our role should be. It seems like that's what you're saying.
yeah. That's very well encapsulated. And and because I'm working for change within law enforcement, particularly the Chicago Police Department, I've been accused of being a hater, and
Right.
that's the farthest thing from me. The vast majority of police officers that I have worked with and worked for are they care deeply about what they do, and they care about the community that they serve. And I think that I want it to be the best police department in the world. So there's no, you can't. Hey, 31 years. If I thought it was going to be something that I don't want to say that my 31 years, I've got some divine right to the police department.
Right.
But I saw it in 30. You got to give me some. You might not give me credit for a lot. Certainly not in this house. My wife is like, God, I don't want to hear your lectures. Um, but that's exactly as you encapsulated. So I I feel that that we can always do better. I just, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens with the mayoral election and who the superintendent is going to be. I think that's going to be very, very telling. I don't think Chicago's got a deep bench, you know. And I know that Eric Carter is the first deputy that was an intern. He's the interim superintendent. And I'll tell you right now, nobody likes the guy. So if they make him superintendent, it's not going to work. Morale is already a huge issue within the police department. So we'll see how that goes moving forward.
Gotcha. Couple quick rapid fire questions. What was your last year in law enforcement? Like, when did you retire?
2020, January of 2020.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my last I kind of specialized for my last I believe it was like the last 8 years. I was detailed to the law department for the city of Chicago. So I worked with a lot of people hate lawyers. I love lawyers. I worked with probably like 20 plus lawyers on the building and land usage, building and license enforcement (BLE). But I also worked in the labor division where we held city employees, police, and other city employees responsible for adhering to the rules and regulations of employment. So I had a lot of cases that we're essentially getting people fired for violating these rules and regulations. And the collective bargaining agreement, it's kind of counterintuitive. If you get arrested for committing a crime, even if you're found guilty, you still don't get fired from the city. That's a separate hearing because the collective bargaining agreement protects those employees. Right. So, but we did the civil prosecution with them. So I did that, and that's what I was retained after that to continue working on with the corporation counsel's office and police misconduct cases. So I had 31 years of I can count on my hands on on one hand the handful of bad days I had, and comparatively speaking, God, it was one. I love it. I love the police department. Love everybody that I work with. I can't say enough about I don't know what the perception is. They're out there they want to just do their job and get home to their families.
Yeah. Well, so 2020 you retired. I'm interested to hear you mentioned a scenario in which you were talking about a building code and your boss said, "Hey, read them as rights." I'm interested to hear like what was, so I'm sure it depends on context. Like I'm sure if you're like arresting somebody that had just assaulted an old lady and you like saw it, it's like, okay, it feels good to lock that person up to an extent, like maybe they're having a bad day, but they don't need to be on the street tonight. Right. Yeah. So in that context, probably feels good. Like, hey, we did some good work tonight. Stops, something bad from happening or whatever. But I'm curious, was there ever a case, and what was the first case in which like you either had to arrest somebody or told somebody you had to arrest them, but in the back of your mind, you were like, what the fuck am I doing? Was there anything like that?
What, you talking about the building, that building situation, or
well, I'm just talking about just in general. Like I could imagine, like I put myself in being a cop, and I'm sure there would be a night where, like, let's say it's in the 90s, and I pull somebody over, and they just have weed in the open console. And it's like, bro, I have to arrest you. I'm sorry, but I have to. So I'm asking you, were there any circumstances where it sucked, but you kind of had to do it?
Yeah, and it was a situation that I didn't have a choice.
Right.
I was actually ordered to arrest, and it was exactly the scenario that you came on. Because I was like, look, you got a bag of weed. Don't be an idiot. What sure. I would do is I would do the like, well, I can't really let them go, so I'd make them dump it out.
Sure.
And then that would be our compromise. And they'd be like, because they would be happy to do, disappointed, but at the same time, they knew what the results were going to be. So I was ordered. I got a sergeant that pulled up on the scene, exactly the scenario, and it was too late at that point in time. And I'm like, and I probably, looking back on it, he made me arrest that. It was a young kid too, or younger. I was ordered to arrest that individual, and I actually think that the reason why the sergeant came by is because he probably, if he probably suspected that was, he had a great deal of discretion here on the street. Well, my guess is he probably suspected that I would probably let the kid go. So he wanted to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah.
That was there. Even the thing was in narcotics, when I was in narcotics, we were locking people up that would, how about this? There would be a street corner conspiracy. So we would get arrest warrants for individuals that were, over a period of time, they would sell drugs to undercover police officers. The state's attorneys would issue arrest warrants. We would arrest those individuals for, over a period of time. We had enough evidence. We'd arrest those individuals as part of the conspiracy. The conspiracy charges were higher charges because it proved a more organized operation than Cole Preston just pitching dope on a street corner by himself. So that's why we wanted to work over a period of time to prove that there was an organized operation. But the next day, what we would do is we would, when I say me, I mean the narcotics division. The next day, we would lock up the individuals that came to buy. So because now those guys are gone. We locked up 12 people. So we've got police officers that were posing now as the new dealers. And when they would come up to solicit drugs from those police officers, we would lock those individuals up for solicitation. Here's the thing. They're addicted. They're users. They're not selling. And the vast majority of arrests that are narcotics arrests are not, you think it's Tony Montana getting arrested. It's not. These are street level individuals that are in possession or use. They're not distributing. So that really was, when I saw that, I'm like, really? Come on. And then people that have been addicted all their lives, and you're going to put them in jail for them, and they need help. You need to fix this. So that was something that really kind of, I don't want to say, but it resonated to the point where, I don't know if I can do this anymore. What wound up happening was I moved. That's when I got more into the civil prosecution end of things, and then went down to the. I was actually in the mayor's office for like 6 months, believe it or not, and then I was detailed to the law department. So everything changed at that point in time.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. Like you say, even in the case of like, let's say they did bust a large distributor, one of the points I've made, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, and I can't claim to have come up with this myself. This thought was inspired by attorneys that I've spoken with and everything else. The idea is like, let's say you do find somebody, because I remember you mentioned earlier, and I hear a lot of people say this, they look to decriminalize like small amounts of drugs. And the idea behind saying that is like, so that we're not busting just users, like you say.
Yeah.
But I even think that like when it comes to large amounts, we should look at that a little bit differently. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. So in the case of cannabis, let's use cannabis as an example because it is currently legal. And let's use an analog of alcohol. Like or cigarettes, if I was caught with a large quantity of alcohol or cigarettes, and I think some people do this, sometimes they'll go to other states and purchase cigarettes because it's at a lower tax.
Yeah.
And I bring all that back and try to sell it, that's a tax issue. very seldom. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you've heard of other cases, but from what I hear, it usually ends up being a tax issue. And if it's bad enough, it could become criminal, but
Yeah,
it's not like you're being treated as a violent criminal. You're being treated
right.
as you're evading taxes.
Yeah,
And it's interesting that mentioned earlier the cannabis law. They kind of fucked it up. I think that's one of the ways they fucked it up. Besides the fact that the legal market is way more expensive than the alternative or the
yeah.
legacy market. Um, I think one of the things we messed up is that we basically just decriminalized small amounts of cannabis because you can only possess up to 30 grams of cannabis. Every other penalty that was established in the 1978 Cannabis Control Act
Yeah,
is still active to this day,
yeah.
like as it was. So, I'm just curious. I know that I went kind of on a long. What do you think about it as dealing it as kind of like almost like a tax issue? And I know that with cannabis, that's the only analog. Obviously, we can't deal with a street level heroin dealer as a
Yeah.
tax issue. But I mean, I don't know. I just think there's a better option than throwing these people in a cage with murderers and rapists. Like we need a, like you say, something that equates with the crime. You know?
So what do we what's the you get 5 plants, um, the home
Right.
grow. So I think if that gets the allowance for that, I think might have an effect if you're allowed to grow more. I
Yeah,
know
so
that.
if you have a medical card, you can at home,
Yeah,
and if you've got your card on you, you can
yeah,
have a higher amount of cannabis. You're
yeah.
absolutely right. So myself, for example, I can have 5 ounces of cannabis on it
Right.
because I have a higher allotment. The standard allotment is actually 2.5. So most people just can hold 2.5 ounces. I talked to my doctor and he says you can hold 5. It's interesting. I talked to my doctor who determined that the police can't get me for the weird. But
Right.
setting that aside, you're absolutely right. If because I have a card and because I can cultivate cannabis at home, as long as I secure all quantities that exceed 30 grams, I'm quoting the law off the top of my head,
Mhm.
um, then there is no possession limit at home. So you're absolutely right. If we were to get, for example, Carol Ammons has proposed language that basically copy and pastes the medical cannabis cultivation laws and changes it so that it's all adults over 21.
Yes.
Bingo. If we did that, yes, that would go a long way towards exactly what we're just talking about, where possession limits would kind of no longer be a thing,
Right.
like they aren't with alcohol or tobacco. I mean, there's no possession limit. There's no analog for that. So that I can
No.
think of.
Yeah. So I think that uh, um, would really make changes in the way. See, I'm looking at law enforcement, and I'm like, even to lock somebody up now for you know possession over the limit, it's a pain in the ass. The
Yeah.
paper. It's like really. So I don't know anybody that really you know on the law enforcement end that spends time doing that. So I thought that the 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 idea or the mindset was to in order to, and that's with our decriminalization efforts with LEAP, let's concentrate on the serious crimes, on the violent crimes. Let's eliminate the enforcement of, that $10 bag of weed that's going to keep a police officer, in the station for 3 hours, or however, with the inventory and processing and what have you. So um, that's why that's what the point of the decriminalization
Yeah.
is. But what you're
And
saying is that, and I don't see with weed. Is it a public health issue? I mean, I don't know if you can frame it that way. I think that the individuals who are benefiting from the taxes that So if you're not, so is the logic this? If you're not growing your own weed, you're buying it from a licensed facility, and those taxes are now going to go, and the profits are going to go to those licensed, individuals or conglomerates or what have you. So is that lobby the strongest lobby because they don't want to lose that revenue? And I think that's because I got in a debate with one of the sheriff. It was the Illinois Sheriff's Association, and at the introduction of the Cannabis Act, the Legalization Act, I believe that 8% of the profits, I believe, were going to go to law enforcement. And he contended that, and that's since changed because I knew it. I'm like, the technology is going to catch up. You'll just do better police work. That's what you want to do. You want to do better police work than he was worried about DUIs and everyone driving under the influence of cannabis. And I'm like, I know the technology is going to, and it has. But then I go, oh, he wasn't happy. I go, oh, 8%? I go, how about this? Would you object to this if it was 12% for law enforcement? And he didn't say, he was like, because because I'm thinking, if his point was like the 8% wasn't enough, either you're against this because of whatever reason, but if you want your cut to be bigger, then don't tell me that weed's a gateway drug,
right,
or it's
right.
not good for you. I'm like, hold on for you. And then the other thing that I thought what I thought was really interesting, and this is completely different than on one of your previous podcasts, is the craft growers. If they would allow, if there was an allowance for craft growers to be assimilated into this industry, I think that there's no limit to what could be accomplished. Just like, it's maybe a stupid analog, but like the craft beer. These guys were brewing. I know somebody that grew. He was brewing beer in his basement using coffee 20 years ago. I'm not exaggerating. And of course I'm like, who the hell would drink that? Guess what? Right? And he would give me these unmarked bottles. Let's try this. I added there's some like raspberry to this. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
So I just don't know if the industry is going to let go of that because they're going to lose money.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about too, you just brought it up. You were talking about how you were around and heard, fielded concerns regarding the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act when it kind of first started coming around. What are some of the concerns that you recall hearing from the law enforcement side? I mean, I recall clearly hearing concerns about home grow. Like I could pull up an article right now that says not only law enforcement were concerned, but also even the licensed cultivators.
Sure.
They opposed home grow, which go to your point, because it cuts into their profits, right?
Yeah.
They'll say a different reason, by the way. They actually cite public health, like you just said. The companies will say, well, we need a regulated market
right.
for, right. Yeah. So that's their perspective. But yeah, I'm just curious, what are some other concerns? So you mentioned, I heard this one too, that you mentioned, everybody's going to be high and driving around. That was a concern. Yeah. Anything else?
No, the two main concerns were the driving while impaired. And the other one was that if you allowed everyone there was no limit on what you could grow at home, that everybody would become, a drug dealer, a weed dealer, and so those were the two main concerns, which I can understand. I can understand and appreciate the impairment, because I don't want to have somebody that's impaired, driving.
Same here. Yeah.
And as much as I'm in favor of the of the legalization aspect. I don't want that to happen. But let's be honest. You think that I'm going to fill up, I'm going to go cut out, a quarter acre of my house, grow weed, and start to deal out of the front of my, out of my house? I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that if you're gonna grow it and you're gonna use it, I do think that it would be a pretty healthy competition between you and your other consumers, to outdo each other. Like, how about this? How about this? So those are the two main concerns: were the impairment while driving, and also that if there was no limit, that everybody would be their local, their neighborhood weed dealer.
Yeah. Do you recall any talk around odor? And the reason I ask that is because I remember, and please tell me if you don't remember this at all, but I remember, or like it could be anecdotal is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I remember leading up to legalization and post legalization, police were warning you, hey, if just because it's legal doesn't mean your car can reek like weed. And in fact, if it does, we'll search your car. And there is still to this day language in the vehicle code that says if your cannabis is not odor proof, it's no question you are guilty of a crime. And it's back to your point of discretion with law enforcement. If they can just say, because that's not really something you can prove in court. So what are you going to do? Bring the weed in and be like, can you guys smell this? Like, you can't really prove that that's how it smelled in the car or whatever, right? So I guess my question is, did you hear any talk or do you recall what I recall with regard to odor and how that was an issue and still is an issue?
People were getting pulled over long before that.
Sure.
That law was put in effect. So what I think is funny is that, now maybe it seems more prevalent. How many times have you been driving down the street? And I was just out with my partner Tony working on a case last week, and we were driving around, and it was a nice day, like kind of a nice day like it is today. And we're driving down the street, and you could smell weed coming out of like this car, another car, that car. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was not anything that was a surprise. So I don't know if I'm sure that there's law enforcement that's using it as a probable cause, as a stop, probable cause, because if it smells that, the only way that you're going to smell a small amount, there's no way you're going to smell a small amount. If you're smoking it, then you're in a vehicle, then you're going to smell it. Even though I have smelled. I did some volunteer work on a hemp farm, preparing for my to teach my cannabis class. And I brought some hemp back the farm was organic, and it was, the plants were beautiful, and the smell was just like, wow, this is really, really talking about, back to nature. It was very interesting. It was very interesting. I learned a lot over that weekend. So I brought some freshly cut hemp back with me. It was in a Ziploc, and I had it in my briefcase, and I had it in my closet. And my wife walked in the house. She was like, "It smells like weed in here." So it's there. And then I've got some other friends of mine who are now that it's become legal, have really indulged. And there's some that is, I'm gonna buy his back porch, and I'm like, man, I can smell this. So there's some very powerful, and it's a wonderful floral, depending on the type. So it doesn't answer your question, but I would, the amount of weed that I think you would have to have in that car would be substantial, because I bought that big bag of hemp, And then my friend who also is very indulgent in marijuana, he's got pretty large quantities of it. So
Yeah. Let me put it this way. Like I hear your point. Let me put it this way though. Bruce Rauner decriminalized cannabis. You remember that? It was like 10 grams or something like that. It's like a small amount. But the key, this is what's crazy to think about from my perspective, and hear me out here. That 10 grams you could have had in your front pocket. You could have had, like, the law did not say anything about, now the law reads it's got to be in this container,
right.
it's got to be child proof, odor proof.
Yes.
Like the law has gotten stricter.
Yeah.
And usually you think decriminalization is like the baby step towards legalization, but it's like, wait a minute. So
No.
that's kind of where I'm approaching it, where it's like I hear your point, where it's like, you if you're smelling it, somebody's probably smoking it or has smoked it, or there was a large quantity in the car. Like I get that, but it's crazy how the law has seemed to have gotten a little stricter since legalization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we've talked about, you and I had this conversation, and they screwed this up.
Yeah.
The state
Yeah.
really screwed this up, and I was very disappointed because I was asked to review some of the of it, and they, I think it was just kind of like a, yeah, let's let them take a look, let's let Lee take a look at it. Um, but what disappointed me was that Heather Steens and Kelly Cassidy, the two legislators that actually proposed and introduced it, and they flew all around the friggin' world, the country for sure. I'm sure they went around. I don't know if they went around the world. I know they went around the country looking at applications of legalization. They came here. They put this thing together, and done nothing. They did not. I thought that this was so important that it could be like the legislation to, like when Roosevelt created Social Security. It was like, this is like the pinnacle of my legislative existence.
Right.
I'll always be remembered for, signed it. I was at when they did the introduction, it was on the West Side. Kim Fox was there, Pritzker was there. And, I was like, wow, this is awesome. This is really, Heather Steens is gone. She's not even a senator anymore. She resigned, and I don't know what Kelly Cassidy's doing, but it lays fallow. There's nothing, you would think that they would actually, I don't know if this is built in to where they would review it after 2 years and try to make the adjustments that it's done. I don't think it's going to change at this point in time, which is very disappointing. I lost
One of the things I have to say, my bad, and I was muted. I thank you for bringing that up because I think there are shortcomings to the bill. I definitely think we can build on it, to just put it lightly. And one of the main failures, I think, is one thing you pointed out, which I want to actually cite the first sentence out of the law, which backs up your point. The law itself said what you just said. But before I get to that, I think another shortcoming of the law is that one of the things, and you can look this up, I'll do my best to remember to put this in I'm all about citations, so you can read up on this reporting. One of the things that Cassidy and Staines, I believe, I know Cassidy for sure, said that they would address was the transparency of the licensing, which, look, you need to look no further than the gambling industry, to see some of the issues that have come up with regard to lack of transparency in licensing. Look, these are specialty licenses. You're privileged licenses. And with that privilege, I'm sorry, I'm just saying, I don't even need to go any further than that. So they said they were going to address that. There was reporting that showed that, and ultimately they did not address it. All of that information is still under locked box, and we just kind of have to trust the state to enforce their own rules. So really quick, to your point that you brought up, I wanted to just show the first language or the first sentence in the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. It says, in the interest of allowing law enforcement to focus on violent and property crimes. The General Assembly finds and declares that the use of cannabis should be legal for persons 21 years of age or older and should be taxed in a manner similar to alcohol. It's funny. I don't think we even met that goal. So that's right out of the law.
Yeah. No, um, that's actually one of the, like, what the state's attorney's office is looking at also, in terms of applying resources. Kim Fox will no longer prosecute small amounts of marijuana possession. She don't even bring it into the courts. And the largest number of court cases in Cook County are related to retail theft. So she changed the limit. I think it's $1,000. So you got to steal an awful lot to reach that threshold. And then the second most cases are related to minor cannabis possession. So she's taking those off the docket, essentially. The third is unlawful use of a weapon. So according to Kim Fox, she wants to apply her resources to that more violent crime, the unlawful use of a weapon, at the cost of, I would say, ignoring the other two more prevalent issues. I'm okay with the weed, kind of ignoring that. Retail theft has turned into a kind of a mess. So it's not, what I'm saying is this, that law enforcement, and she's a law enforcement agent, is also looking at trying to focus on the more violent crimes, and devoting resources to it. In theory, because, I mean, if you turn on the TV or read the newspaper, there's still a lot of things going on in terms of violent crime in the city and the county. So, I did not know that was the very opening line of the law itself.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So I wanted to I think this is a good segue, unless you have other thoughts on cannabis. We've kind of touched on the CRTA, and I want to segue to what, some of the things like modern policing and such. But you brought up a few topics that I wanted to make sure to, if you wanted to talk about them a little bit more, we could. The Opioid Overdose Prevention Act, I think is what it was called. And
Yes.
of course, the Cure Act, which I love and I'd be happy to talk about. But I don't know about the first one you mentioned. So please tell me and my audience a little bit more about it. We were talking a little bit before the show, and it sounded like a really progressive proposal. So would love to hear more from your perspective.
So it is House Bill 002. And it provides for overdose prevention sites, safe consumption sites, where there will be medical supervision of drug use and monitored, so they're to prevent fatal overdoses. And because the supplies will be sterile, and also what you bring in will also be checked, whether it contains. Now the issue with fentanyl is that some of it is now undetectable on this. So if you're doing a field test, some of the fentanyl is undetectable with the field test.
Yeah, I feel like, hear me out on this. I talked to somebody who does drug testing. I think it's because, I mean, these aren't coming from regulated sources, so they're not homogeneous mixtures.
Yeah,
They're very much a heterozygous. I'm bringing out my old freshman year of high school
I like that
science
word.
class, but that's what it is, right? And for folks that don't want to Google it, heterozygous is an uneven mixture. Homogeneous is it's like a Coca-Cola. Every drink is the
Yes.
same. Weird plug for Coca-Cola, but that's all I could think of right now. So
Yeah. So the overdose prevention, this House Bill 002, would provide for safe consumption sites. And um, this is not new to other parts of the country and the world. Um, it's going to be, I think, I mean, I'd like to think that we as a society are open-minded enough to support this, but I don't know. We're going to put something together. We meaning, I might be testifying on Friday. Is it the 8th? Oh no, it's Wednesday. I believe that's when this bill is going to be on the floor. Um, but what it's going to do is it's going to reduce the number of overdose deaths, reduction in the visibility of public drug use. HIV, hepatitis C are also parts of ancillary results of not using clean needles. Um, and I think that that's the most important thing in my mind is the reduction of fatalities. And it's been proven to do that. What do we have here? We could have had 4,000 preventable deaths from opioids had we implemented this previously. So that is, I think, a very important um, well, it's going to be hopefully it's going to be a law.
yeah,
So I signed on. I believe LEAP is going to sign on as an organization. Um, the Illinois Cure Act, you're a fan of that, right?
yes, I am a supporter of the Cure Act.
Yeah. So am I, coming from what little harm reduction. I mean, um, when I worked with, LEAP asked me to become a speaker on a couple of different subject matters, and harm reduction was one of those. And that's actually how I got my gig at Wright College. Was I put together a presentation that incorporated prohibition, and also what was going on nationwide in terms of harm reduction, police diversion, where, and we have this in Chicago now, and I believe the police officers are carrying the lock zone, which is that has been going on the East Coast and other parts of the country for a long time. Chicago's always kind of late to the game. They're I don't know why the police department, it's just kind of monolithic in a lot of aspects. So, but now they're nasal naloxone trained, and so I put together this presentation that included what other law enforcement agencies were doing strategically to, and one of those things, it's called LEAD, Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. And it began in Seattle during the HIV crisis. What was happening was, this is really funny. It's not funny, it's sad. So there was an organization out there that now is transforming into LEAD. And what they were doing is they were providing syringes for safe injections, and they were also providing condoms for sex workers to try to cut down on on AIDS spreading. So what do you think the Seattle? So that what they would do is they would set up tables in certain areas where it was prevalent, where there were sex workers and there was drug use. So what do you think that the response of the Seattle Police Department was? So they're locking up these volunteers for blocking the sidewalk with their tables. Then they would lock up if they came across a sex worker that had one of those condoms that were given by that organization. They would say,
Wow.
"Oh, you're a sex worker. We're
Like,
locking you up for." Like, no.
Wow.
So anyway, it wound up happening. The ACLU sued and found out that that the vast number of individuals that are being locked up were African American. But what wound up happening was it opened up a discussion between law enforcement and the organization and LEAD, the organization that wanted to do harm reduction. So that opened up, and they created this where now if you are in possession of heroin or cocaine, or you're locked up for any type of crime that supports your substance use disorder, like shoplifting or prostitution, you have the option to go into treatment rather than go to jail. And that's what we want to do. Going to jail with someone who has a substance use disorder is not going to help them. It's not going to help our society. So that's what Chicago has adopted this. They've made some changes. It's I think it's 5 or 8 ounces in the lead. In the lead, the law enforcement agencies that use lead as the model. In Chicago, it's only I think it's 1 ounce, which is kind of restrictive. I think they should expand that, but at least they're thinking about it. So there, I believe there's 5 prototype districts now that you can. They're working with the thresholds is the social service agency, and it's saving lives. It really is saving lives. There's individuals that have. I don't have the current totals. I will, because I will present this to my classes towards the end of the semester. So no, it's working. It's saving lives, and I'm glad that Chicago is moving in a more progressive direction.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that topic up, because that's what I was going to follow up my only question about the Opioid Overdose Prevention Act, but I assumed there were already programs to cover for it. But what you'll often hear critics of these measures say is like, oh, so we're just providing a safe haven. We're not getting these people help. It's like, no, there are programs for that. This is also important though. Like, we can walk and chew bubble gum.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, and we have to meet those individuals where they are. So if they're ready to take advantage of that, then hopefully they will. If they're not, they know at some point where they can go to. And if in fact they want to make changes in their lives, they have that availability. So that stigma. So what's really interesting is with the lead. So the first responders are often, when if there's an overdose particularly, and you call 911 or someone calls 911, with the Good Samaritan law, that allows for it. No one's getting arrested if you're trying to save somebody's life, because in most cases, the ratio is 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 police versus, I think it's 1 to 3 versus 1 to 5 or 1 to 7. So if you call 911, the cops are showing up first. The ambulance is not showing up. The cops are going to be there first. So you don't want to lock anybody up because they've got paraphernalia, they've got drugs there. You want to save that person's life that's in jeopardy. That's in jeopardy. So the Good Samaritan law provides for that, which is which is a good thing. But the other thing is that with working with law enforcement and educating police officers and law enforcement agencies, they understand now that there are options available, and they understand the disease better rather than stigmatizing these individuals. And I think that's a huge step forward for trying to, I'd like to see the drug war end completely, but if we start to chip away at it, particularly with first responders, with police officers that are going to meet these individuals, in that space where they're using, I think that's a huge step forward.
Absolutely. And just really quick, but I don't want to forget, how best would people support the law enforcement action program? That's LEAP, right?
Yeah, Law Enforcement Action Partnership.
And sorry, Law Enforcement Action Partnership. I've got the website up. My apologies.
Yeah, you can see the the main programs are community responder model, which when we talk about healthcare crises or mental health crises, that is again, what we're trying to do is we are trying to provide help for the individuals that need the help, but also free up law enforcement to work on issues that are much more like violent crime issues. And that's what the co-responder model allows law enforcement to do. So it's certainly not anti-police. LEAP is, everybody that's involved in LEAP is either former law enforcement, a judge, or prosecutor. So everyone has a great deal of respect for the law enforcement community, but they also have a great deal of experience. And that experience has proven that a lot of things we've been doing up till now aren't solving the problems. That's why we're moving in a more progressive direction. So how can you help? Donate. Donate. But more importantly, well, not more importantly, but as important is to support particularly now, I've got 3 very important pieces of legislation that LEAP is going to be supporting, like right now, like in the next few weeks in the state of Illinois. So if you believe that we should have overdose prevention sites, if you believe that descheduling psychedelics in order to help individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder or depression, then support House Bill 1. If you believe that juveniles who are arrested should have more chances for restorative justice and community-based interventions rather than saddle them and their families with fines for not complying because they can't comply. They don't have the money, simply. Then you have the opportunity to reach out to your legislators and help support these 3 very, very important.
What was the number on the last one you mentioned with the juvenile fines?
The juvenile is, I try to, that Google Docs kind of screwed me up here.
No problem. If you want to get it to me after the show, I can throw it in the podcast description.
The Google Docs kind of screwed me up. I tried to cut and paste it, and I'm not really a Google, even though I do use Google Docs with my at school.
It's all good. We can throw it in the description for people that want to support.
Sure,
that.
it's actually a House bill and a Senate bill. It's Senate Bill 1463.
Okay.
And House Bill 3120, juvenile fines and fees. I'm trying to eliminate those or mitigate those 2 bills. I'll have to write those down so I know.
Thank you for for.
No, thank you for the opportunity to speak about, um, about what we both think, and a lot of people share this, are important initiatives.
Yeah. So feel free to add to this, but I think the best way to support some of these bills would be to first and foremost, I think, and maybe this is not in any particular order, but I think it would include all these things. Reach out to your elected
Yes.
representative, whether that's in the House or the Senate, and tell them about these bills and that you support these bills and that they should too. They should co-sponsor these bills. Then I think you should also look at, and we can put a link in the podcast description. I think this is the hearing you're referring to, at least for, I know, the Cure Act. There's going to be a hearing on March 8th at 10 a.m.
Yeah,
So if you want to, now the witness slips particularly, you can submit up into the conclusion of the committee hearing.
right.
So what you would do in that case, you can click create witness slip, and we'll also throw some instructions on how to fill out a witness slip in the podcast description. If this is something you'd like to do, those are some ways that you can support these initiatives. So you can see the Cure Act at the top there.
Sure.
You'd have to search to see where on the agenda the other bills we mentioned are, but
Yeah,
that's how you do it roughly. And like I said, we'll paste that link in the podcast description and
yeah.
some instructions. Anything else you might add on how they could support the legislation or LEAP? Um,
No,
Anything else we
I
didn't
just think
cover?
that your podcast in particular is focused on um, on these initiatives. Um, I just I
Yeah,
just
civil liberties.
yes, and I just wish that I think that if your listeners and I guess as they probably do this, try to share the ideas that you've been presenting with your podcast with just try to get everyone that they know to think a little bit differently, especially when it comes to there's still so many people that that I mentioned the word psychedelics and they're like, whoa, like what are you, like no, and then they're way past the cannabis thing with me. They're like, oh yeah, I know, maybe. So I just to share and I don't want to say the word educate because I don't really like that term. Um, you know, just to propagate the movement forward
Yeah.
of these ideas, and always to remember that the basis of any of this work, particularly with LEAP, is we're trying to help people. That's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. And the more people that we help, the better our society's going. So it might sound whole corny, but that's how I feel. So that's really how I feel. So I want to make this place, the world, a better place to live.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, I've got a few more questions for you, if that's okay.
No problem.
Uh, this is a good one, I think, for you. I have a feeling that either people that have thought about being in law enforcement or listening to this show or in law enforcement or formerly law enforcement, since it's a law enforcement episode, right? So my question is, I've got some friends, or I guess people that I went to school with. I don't know if they consider me a friend, who knows? But I consider them a friend, right? Uh, my question is, what advice would you give to people who are interested in pursuing a career in law enforcement, but may have concerns about the current state of drug policy, right? So um, I've got friends that are my age and they have those conflictions. Like they know a stoner.
Yeah.
And of course, we're dealing with weed differently now. But yeah, my question is, what's your advice for people who are interested in pursuing a career in law enforcement, but may have concerns about the current state of drug policy?
You know, the drug policy issue is particularly now with, I mean, even the standards have changed. So I don't believe that a while ago it was if you try to get on the FBI and you said that you had used drugs before, you were gone. Then I think they changed it to 5 years, and then they changed it to 10 years. And now I don't even think they ask the question. So because then if you say you didn't do it and they put you on a polygraph and then they ask you again, then you lied and then you're gone for sure. So I don't think that and it's just as a generational thing. I think this way because I grew up in that environment with weed was we had guys, and I just, that when we were, somebody had it, and it was, yeah, we'll do this, and we used to call it skunk weed from Wisconsin, or ditch weed, which is funny because how cannabis grows is in a nitrogen soiled setting, where there's garbage and refuse and what have you, and if there's moisture there and there's sunlight, so that's why we would call it ditch weed, because you could find it at the side of the road in some places up in Wisconsin. So I think it's different now. I think that generationally, it's more accepted. So I don't think that I would not dissuade anybody, and I don't think there's a hard argument about these stoners or these I think that law enforcement now has come around to where we understand substance use disorder as a disease. I think that they should be a little bit more worried about the perception of being in law enforcement, and particularly with the Black and brown community, how you're viewed as a police officer, which is negatively. But as I said earlier, the vast majority of contact between law enforcement and the Black and brown community is based on, I think, is suspicion of drug activity or drug sales or use. So if we start to move away from that, then we can start to talk about healing the community as what law enforcement can do in support of a community, rather than coming in there and the first thing you think is they're going to beat me up, they're going to lock me up, and it's not like that. It shouldn't be like that. I mean, we're every student I've had for the last 2.5 years, I ask them, the first question I ask them when they take my class is, why do you want to be a police? If in fact you want to be a police officer, I don't have all students say, well, why do you want to be a police officer? Every single one of them tells me, because I want to help people. So that's what we need to concentrate on. That's what your friends need to concentrate on, is that aspect of it. And the way things are now, it's still very divisive. It's very, very depending on who you're talking to. But once you get out of that squad car and you walk around, and you talk to people as a human being, and you'll see, as we said earlier, they want the same things that you want. They want safety for their family. They want a roof over their head. They want an income, food. Just enjoy life. With their family and friends. So we're really we're all human beings. Well, I wouldn't dissuade them from. And here's another thing too. They want a good job with a pension. They could do that. I mean, the job is great. You can go into a situation where you can find your way within that law enforcement agency. So that I think is important also. And there's a lot of opportunity, because a lot of young people now are being dissuaded from going to law enforcement because of the issues with law enforcement and the Black man. Most of my students are Hispanic, and they get it from their friends. Like, man, why do you want to be a cop? Look what the police are doing. And I tell them, no, that's all the more reason why you want to be a police officer. So you can go in there and make the changes that you see necessary. From the outside, it's not going to happen. It could happen, but you have a chance to do it from the inside. So No, I wouldn't. And there's a lot of jobs that are open. I've got a friend of mine who retired. He's moving down to outside of Nashville, and he's got his pick from. He's got some experience with Chicago. I haven't been in Chicago for a long time, but he's got job offers. And he told me, he said, they're, we're dying for law enforcement. We're dying for police officers. So it's a good job. And the most important thing is you had a chance to really make change, to really help people in a positive way.
Yeah. So I've got two like final questions. I mean, it's possible other things will pop up, but two more planned questions. Um, the first one is kind of in the spirit of that idea that you just were talking about. It is a good job, right? Um, I have always liked the idea of being a police officer, and I think I've even made the joke on the show that I'd be the police officer that like pulls you over and doesn't just slap you on the wrist for speeding. I'll be like, dude, look, hey, hold on a second. I'll pull something up on YouTube. You want to see what happens when your tire blows out at 80 miles an hour? Like I would try to make it an educational experience, and I know that you probably this is probably where people say, yeah, you're just trying to help everybody, but it's like seriously, but I thought that's what my job was,
Yeah,
like I'm trying to give people the benefit of the doubt, and I'm not just saying like I'm not just the guy that caught you for the number 79, in a 70, and
yeah,
that's what I'm getting you about. It's like, dude, I'm looking out for your well-being. I don't want to pick you out of the median or whatever if your tire were to blow out. But my question is, I think it probably is a good job in many ways, but I hear a lot of, and it tends to be in the like the spirit of like the thin blue line thing or whatever. But what is the job? Has the job become harder? Is there any truth to that narrative? Like, I'm just curious, when you retired in 2020, did you I don't take you as the person that felt like that, but did you have a sentiment or feeling that other people felt like, man, people hate law enforcement? Because it was around 2020 and such, that time, that there were a lot of protests, and the whole defund the police thing became a big thing. So like what's your take on that? And like you did mention that morale is low, so I know I just threw a kind of a large topic at you, but what is the state of being a police officer with that in mind? Like, is it really challenging? Like,
uh, the the thing that really uh, changed hurt morale was um, during the um, that unsettled summer of 2020. I believe it was 2020, right? That unsettled summer of 2020.
it's hard to
The
remember. It's all a blur.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think you're right. 2020.
what I was sharing information with still what colleagues that still work, um, and my wonderful friend Michaeline Alexa, who's the commander of the now she's the commander of the 17th district, and she's a wonderful person and a great police officer, and she was the only tactical lieutenant, female tactical lieutenant on Chicago Police Department, which that tells you something, right? She's the only female. So um, she told me that there was no plan going into this unrest. And she said that she worked 30 plus days in a row without getting a day off. And she was so exhausted for not only herself, but for the TAC officers that worked for her, that she would go into her office at the end of the 12-hour shift, shut the door, close the blinds, and cry. And that's how much pressure she was. And she told me that everybody hated the police. And she said part of that was because the police reaction after working your 25th day in a row, how do you expect somebody to say, you know what, I'm sorry, this is, I understand what's going on here. What, no, and it reached a point where we had met at such loggerheads with the public and the police department that it was dangerous for everybody. So thankfully that subsided, I think we should take the opportunity to. And now what's going to happen is with the police councils that have been elected, each police district now has a council representative. And they're charged with, I believe, working with the police departments and the community as a type of liaison between those two entities. They're going to see that that's not going to be an easy job because, but they have to have, you have to have police officers that have that open mind. Like I said, my partner Freddie was like, when he told me, you go talk to those, you like those community people, you go talk to them. I'm sitting in the car. You know, I think that is changing now. I think the 2 years or the 2.5 years since that, we're starting to be more understanding of each other's situations there. So I personally, I can't listen. I wasn't, you know, at the Logan statue. It wasn't the Christopher Columbus statue. It was the Logan statue on Michigan Avenue. I mean, how do you think a police officer would feel? What the protesters were, what they did prior was they put cases of soda pop in garbage cans surrounding that statue, knowing that they were going later on to protest. And they were throwing full, if you see that video, they're throwing full cans of soda pop at the police officers that were surrounding that statue. You know, so how do you reconcile that on either group's, well, certainly on the protesters' part? These police officers were like, hey, go over here and protect this statue. And you're going to pelt them with full cans of soda pop? You know, to me, that was like, what are we doing here? So had I been in that situation, I wouldn't have been too happy. So, you know, not that the reaction by the police should be over the top and a return of violence, but I mean, think about that. I mean, put yourself in that situation. And police officers were hurt. Imagine getting hit in the head with a full can of pop from, you know, that's got some trajectory and some torque to it too. So that's what we're past that now. We're past that. So I'm hoping that, you know, we can heal.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for addressing that. I was curious, you know, if it felt futile. I know other I've tried to interview active law enforcement because I know some, and, you know, they all talk about, like, you know, privately with me, how bad morale is and how everybody's retiring and such. But I can't tell if it's like they're in their own ecosystem and they really have like it's hard for me to tell. And so sometimes I serve as a check on that. Like I ask, like, you know, like, what is the big deal, right? And they're able to explain it. And sometimes having that outside perspective and having to explain that, they realize like what is and isn't actually worth leaving about, right? But yeah, I just hear that all the time that, you know, it's not good right now.
No,
you know?
it's a stressful situation too, particularly if you're out there every single day. You know, I fortunately wasn't in the thick of it there. Whether that be from just, you know, I working with the attorneys, but I did have some individuals within city government that recognized I had certain skills, and they knew that I could apply those skills within different areas of not only the police department but the city itself. But not everybody has that, you know, that good fortune. Now I don't, you know, it's to meet that challenge on a daily basis it takes a special person. So you know, I just want everyone to keep in mind that no police officer wakes up in the morning and says, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go shoot some black kid.
Right.
No, it doesn't happen. It doesn't. So I just, you know, there's going to be a need for it. I'm hoping that this community, these community, these police council members, they're also going to be charged with selecting the superintendent. Each one of those, every district, I think they're going to have 7 individuals from a citywide area are going to be appointed or elected, and that 7 are going to pick the superintendent. So that's a huge responsibility, and I'm hoping that they will be true liaisons between the community and the police, almost as if they're community members that are embedded in the police department. So now we're not like, I'm in a squad car, I'm in a police district, and you're in the community. Now you've got community people that are going to be in that police district and in those squad cars. And I think it's going to give everybody a better perspective. So I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. Hopefully optimistic. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, our last question is, it's kind of just to inform the public, really, because it kind of is in the same spirit of what you just said, which is like, these are humans. They wake up every morning, and really, like you said, when you ask your students, it's because they want to do a good job. They want to protect their communities and they want to protect people. None of them are getting in the job because they want to shoot or be in that situation at all. Like, optimally, you're not in that situation, I would think, right? But I did want to ask, like, with regard to like the image of police today, and we can describe why this looks this way. But I recently saw this video on Reddit, and it's the Illinois State Police pulling up, and I want to make sure that we're clear that, you know, we don't have the full context of what's happened and everything and what's going on, or at least I don't. But I just wanted to show this for our people that are watching. If you're not watching, it's chillinois.net/video. So the Illinois State Police pulled up to a property. And again, I don't know what happened. I'm not going to play the sound, but what I want you to see, first of all, is the military equipment, but also, and I don't think anybody's expecting me to say this, but these people look scared. And I, you know, they look ridiculous too. I will say that. I don't know why you're wearing night goggles in the morning, why you even have that equipment with you. But what I want to say is that my takeaway from this video is that these look like kids, and they look like they're just trying to do their job and they're scared. Now, look, I don't know what they did, and it obviously was excessive. They're pulling up in this military equipment. This middle guy here is going to bring out what he calls a less than lethal grenade. And he says, don't worry, I would only shoot it at your lower or at mid portion. Right. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes me feel better. That's just me joking. Again, my point in showing this is not to get into the politics or the context of this specific issue. What I wanted to tell people that are wondering why the police look like this, am I wrong in saying it's the 1033 program? Or something to that effect. Do you get how I'm approaching this?
Yeah, it isn't for your listeners. That program, here's a mentality that, and I also helped write an op-ed with, and I can send it to you and you can post it on this episode. It's with some warrior policing mentality, and how law enforcement has to get away from that. It has to really get away from that. And actually, Brad, I don't know if I've got it here or I've got it at school. I think I've got it at school. Bradley Radko wrote an entire book on the warrior policing mentality. And I don't think that in certain situations, there is a need to do that, to bring in that type of response. But I think that in a lot of cases, police departments are way too heavy-handed and want to jump to that thing right away. which is, absent, which is completely opposite of or different than what they would train somebody to do. You wouldn't come out like this. You want to come out on this level, and if you have to raise it, then fine. But you pull in one of those Bearcats, and those guys dressed like an occupying army. What do you think the reaction is going to be by people? So no, I will send you the link, if I could, on the warrior policing, and it's one of the things that I tell impart to my students, that we can't. It can't be that way. We're not an occupying army. We can't be seen as an occupying army, and that's, I think, part of the reason that right away, the community would. I mean, if that thing pulled up in front of your house, what's the first thing you're going to do?
I mean, yeah,
crapping them. They're like, holy, what the, So that's the reaction. You can't get a different reaction than that. So
right.
And if that's the reaction you want, okay, but I don't see why you would want to have that reaction.
You're right.
Military vehicle. It's a military vehicle. Yeah, I'll send you my warrior mentality. I was involved in that, and it's a good op-ed, and it lays out why we have to move away from that, and one of the reasons is the perception that we are completely at a point like that, we are completely divergent from society as we know it. When you come in with a freaking tank dressed up in armor like that, now it's like, hold on, what, it's just no, we don't want that, and we want to get away from that as much as we can.
Yeah, and did I mistakenly connect two dots on the 1033 program? Like, would you agree that, like, from what I understand, for folks that are listening, and maybe you can refine my understanding, because I don't know a lot about it, I'll be honest. But the 1033 program, it's this idea that, like, military equipment can be sent basically to law enforcement, auctioned off at a super cheap price. And so people are wondering, like, where the fuck did they get a tank?
Yeah.
I used to be in Champaign or Urbana a lot, and I actually will be there later this week. And the city of Champaign has a tank. I don't think they call it that anymore because the perception of a tank has changed since they had gotten it.
Yeah.
But right. So am I connecting the dots correctly, or what are can you give back? Do I have an accurate background of the 1033 program?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I think they either offer it at a discount, because some of that equipment is outdated. So not that much outdated. It can still be utilized. But that's up to, it's almost like keeping up with the Joneses. If Naperville's got a Bearcat, then Downers Grove wants a Bearcat.
Sure.
So I've got the warrior. I've got the op-ed was in the crime report a couple of years back, and it's actually how warrior policing undermines U.S. law enforcement, and it's very, very it's this warrior policing mindset that we have to win at all costs. We can't come, that's primarily the basis of this. And when you go into a situation, whether it's in a Bearcat with armor, or it's in a situation where you've been called on as a police officer and you've got to deal with someone one-on-one, in that situation, you feel it escalating, but you still feel that you've got to take it to the ultimate conclusion by locking somebody up, or wrestling with them or what have you, rather than stopping and stepping back and say, you know what, maybe we could do this better on another day. So you've got this mentality, you can't lose at any cost. And it costs police officers their lives in some cases, and it costs them their homes and their pensions. So, I'm very, I'm not in favor of the the militarization of law enforcement. Quite the opposite. I think we need to be a kinder, gentler police force. So, yeah, like I said, Bradley Balco wrote a book, and I don't have it with me. I've got it at school. That goes into quite a bit of detail on warrior policing and the problems that it causes.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you for mentioning that so folks can look into it and research. We're all about
Yeah.
trying to give people things so that they can pick up and run with it, you know?
Okay.
Um, well, hey, Dave, we're at the top of our time slot. I could talk with you for many more hours, but we'll save it for next time. I think we'll have an opportunity to chat again in the future. Maybe we can make it happen in person. I'd love to meet you. Maybe we could go out to lunch or dinner afterwards.
That'd be great. I'd like to my harm reduction presentation. I'd like to do that so we could talk about what law enforcement is doing in terms of
That'd be awesome.
yeah, in terms of law enforcement is doing. Go into detail about the LEAD program and also in detail about police assisted recovery, which is there's quite a few programs. As a matter of fact, there's also um, there's a program in it might be Downers Grove where now any if there's a police call related to involvement with a juvenile offender or a juvenile offender or subject that actually individuals that are trained to deal with youth professionally are responding to those calls. So we're taking it a step further from just like the a mental health crisis type call. So, law enforcement's working, as I said earlier, that to have that open mindset, to letting go and not having to think that they've got to fix every problem that they're faced with. So, yeah, I'd like to talk. I'd like to come back at some point in time and go over my harm reduction presentation. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, hey, I guess just as a last thought, if anybody if anybody felt like they could learn more from you and are interested in law enforcement, how would they go about seeking a formal education with you in it?
Oh, they could get me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and the you can post my contact information if you'd like on the
Sure.
on the website. It's dfranco3211 at Gmail. And if anybody wants to talk to me about what LEAP is doing, any of the legislation that's moving forward, or anything that they want to talk about law enforcement related, I'd be happy to. Or they can come to Wright College and take my classes.
That's actually what I was asking. Is it like wrightcollege.edu or what?
Yeah, no, Wright College. Yeah, we're at Narragansett and Montrose in the Dunning area of right by Harlem and Irving, by the Dunning area of Chicago. And yeah, one of my classes in person. My police organization and management classes in person. My juvenile justice classes online. I've got 24 students with my juvenile justice class. So because we're online, so I've got students from all over the Chicagoland area that actually attend different city colleges. So I'd be happy to have them. It would be wonderful.
Sweet. Sweet. Well, there you go, folks. Wright College, if you're looking for that formal education. Dave Franco, if you're just looking to connect to the man himself. And LEAP, right? It was in the website. I just had it pulled up. We'll have it in the podcast description, folks, if you'd like to look into LEAP. It's the Law Enforcement Action Partnership, lawenforcementactionpartnership.org. So be sure to support the police officers that seem to be doing what the job should be, in my opinion, right? Kind of goes back to my idea of being the cool cop that like explains things, right? It's like, hey, I'm looking out for you. I really am looking out for your best interest. I want the best for you, and I want the best for this community. So anyways, again, it's been a pleasure today. I hope you enjoyed your time.
I did indeed.
Good to hear. And we'll see you on the next episode, folks. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. Take care.
Thanks, Cole. Mahalo. Thank you.